just because somebody's your friend or your stake president or whatever advises you to, or maybe they're starting something and it looks really good, doesn't necessarily make it a good investment.
I think, as we were talking the other day, these are the things that really make us us. You know, and you know, we did this challenge, the Solid 30, but why did we choose those things? You know, we talked about doing it and what people should do and why it was important, but we never really talked about why we picked those things, and then why we've always focused on them. Because it wasn't like we just randomly chose some topics. It was, hey, these are actually the things that we've really focused on that have helped us build incredible lives, right?
It is, yeah.
So,
yeah, no, I mean, I think just coming up with this whole podcast idea and coming up with the name Solid, you know, what does it take to live a solid life? Yep. And then we just kind of thought of what is it? And it just happened to be the F's, you know, finances, friends, fitness, family, faith. That's backwards. We're going to go backwards today.
Yep.
And that just kind of seemed to fit into living a solid life. And you had just been, I remember when we were going to do the Solid 30 challenge, you were just completing 75 hard, I think, for the second or third time.
Yeah.
And that was also kind of a basis for it, seeing that challenge out there that so many have benefited from in a good way. And I've never actually officially done 75 hard. I've done, you know.
You haven't?
I haven't.
Didn't know that.
I've never actually officially done that. But that was the part of the inspiration for me with this too, was just the idea of that. And anyway, that's.
Yeah, I agree, dude. I think that most people avoid pain, and then still end up having it somewhere in their lives, right? But because they avoid what they perceive as the pain of, well, really is the pain of change, they end up having these pains in their lives of, you know, frustration or whatever in some area of their life. And I think for me, doing a challenge like this is where normally we're a time where I might take a rest day or I might take it easy or something like that, which I don't very often on myself. But if I was going to normally, but I'm doing a challenge, it's like, no, I committed to this thing. And I also think that builds great habits, not only for ourselves, but also for people watching us that we want to inspire, our kids or our spouses.
Yes.
Because they see you make a commitment and then they see you fulfill that commitment. And I think it does something special to us saying, hey, I said I was going to do something and then I completed it. It gives you this self-confidence, which I think is crucial in your self-image. And I've said it so many times. I think that's a fundamental, piece to succeeding in anything in life. But then it also makes it gives you credibility with other people because they watched you completed something you promised you would do, right?
Yes. I also think there's a physiological change that happens within you, within your brain, within your body. Just give you an example today. So I went hunting this morning and for some reason I ended up getting a bad headache. I don't know where it came from. So came home and I just was not feeling very good, but I hadn't done my cold plunge, hadn't done my workout yet. So I just made a decision. I actually heard Andrew, I think it was Andrew Huberman on a podcast. It wasn't Joe Rogan's podcast or Cameron. It was someone else's. But he talked about the benefits of doing something you don't want to do when you really don't want to do it has a bigger impact on you in a positive way than just doing it, you know, when maybe you feel like it a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
I did not feel like it today, but I jumped in the cold plunge, got out, just banged out 100 burpees. Yeah. And again, headache gone, energy back, and been feeling great all day ever since. It's just crazy to me. And, you know, just doing something that simple got my day 180 degree turned around. You know what I felt like doing? Coming home and, man, I need to take a rest. I need to take a nap, and I don't feel good, you know. Like I felt kind of sick. Like it was almost a migraine type thing, you know, for whatever reason. So if anybody's wondering, you know, why do we do this crazy stuff? It's because of that. It really does make an impact, and it can turn your life around on a dime. It really can.
Well, then it's how you start building character, and it's how you start becoming this kind of person to where it's naturally, and then you can start leveling up where that, you know, something that used to be hard now is just a daily discipline, and then new things are hard. And so then you face a new challenge. You go, oh, I got to lean into it. Right. And then and then you learn how to change those things. Like in your case, Hey, I have a headache. I'm not feeling great. I know. Get into the cold. Go do a workout, which is still uncomfortable.
Seems like the opposite of what you should do.
Fighting pain with pain.
Yeah. Like, who wants to get in freezing cold water when you have a bad headache?
When it's 34 degrees outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. But then you do it and you go, it worked.
Yeah.
And I've been learning to do that more and more, because when I feel like crap, it's like I hear people that when they have jet lag, that's the most important time to go and work out.
Yep.
Because it'll help reverse
It's actually the biggest thing I do, man. Anywhere I travel, if I get off a plane, I go to a hotel, and the first thing I do is work out. I don't care what time of day it is.
And you don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Like you feel like, man, I just got done traveling. But man, you go get that workout in, and it gets you on track a lot quicker than if you don't do it.
It does, yeah. I think it helps with your circadian rhythm. I think it helps you get on track. You can sleep better if you're in a new time zone. Yeah, so much. But yeah, it definitely is not the thing I want to do. It's the thing I choose to do because I know it's the best thing for my life, right?
Yep. Amen.
Yep.
Amen. So we're going to cover these today. We're going to go backwards, though, right? In priority, what we would say is priority, right? All of them are important, but we typically say faith is most important, then family, then fitness, then your friends, then finance, and they all go together. I mean, they all should be in harmony with one another, right? Yep. But we're going to go from finances and go the other way. So what did you want to?
And the reason why, I said I thought we ought to do that today was because for those of you listening, I think that faith is the one that ties all of these things together. I remember early on in our business, Art used to say that it would go faith, family, or how did he say it? Faith first, family second, business third is how he would say it, right? And people would take it as like a linear thing, like faith first, family second, business third. And it was like almost a priority over another. The more mature I got in business, the more I realized if I allowed faith to guide those other two parts of my life, they were always way better, right? And so
I don't think they should be compartmentalized. I think they should be one together.
Yeah, so I don't think it's faith first, family second, business third. I think it's faith has priority over it all and influences above all these other two things that are important.
Because of faith, you act the way you act with your family and with your business and with all your friends.
Exactly. So that was my idea of, I think it would be wise for us to finish on faith for those that listen and they listen to the entire podcast, that they get to the end and realize, all right, this is how I tie it all together, and this is the important fundamental that is going to make all this work. Because I think some people, you really see them focus on these other parts, and whether it's in finance or fitness or friends or family, and they do a really good job, and it's just like something's missing or they drop the ball in one area of their lives, and you're like, man, I didn't see that challenge coming in life. And then you realize like, oh, maybe it was just the faith part of their life that they weren't really focused on making better. And so these other parts of their life just didn't become as fruitful as they wanted them to be, right?
Yep. So
let's start, man. Let's start with the finances. I think it's pretty obvious, especially on our podcast, why finances are important. It's interesting, dude. And, obviously we're in the financial services business for a lot of years. I mean, between the two of us, almost 40 years. And so we would all, I know you would too, and I would read so much, and I always read these studies that would say things like above $75,000 a year, money doesn't really impact happiness. Well, recently there's been quite a few studies that show that people have changed, and that the higher your income is, odds are you are going to be happier. But it's not because of the money, it's because of the options you have in life, right? And so I think it's very important. In fact, I think it's probably underrated on how important getting your financial affairs in order is, simply because of the way that the world programs us, right? I mean, people are constantly telling us, hey, it's okay to be average. It's okay to not be wealthy. It's okay when, like, why would we do that? Would we ever send our kids to school and say it's okay to get, C's or D's? Like, no, we want our children to get A's. So why is it any different in our financial lives?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah, I think so. I think, wherever you just choose to set your bar is where you're going to end up fighting for or shooting for, right? Your life will give you, life won't just give you what you expect. It'll give you what you fight for. And
exactly.
You hear that all the time. And so when it comes to finances, just some fundamental stuff that I think when we do the challenge, we say you got to save at least 10% of your income, and that's minimum though, right?
Yep.
That's minimum, and that might be a stretch for some people with their income where it is right now, and other people that's nothing, that they can save 20, 30, 40, 50% or more, right? I mean, there's been times in my life, been very blessed building a business. I've been able to save like 80% in a month before, or more. So it can happen. That's obviously after you have your business expenses and taxes and all your stuff you got to do, right?
Yep.
But save and invest that 10% minimum. And then, we talked about this in financial service all the time. People go, how do I organize that 10%? And we would always talk about take about 50% of that and put that into an emergency fund until you have 3 to 6 months of income put away. Because if you have 3 to 6 months of income put away in an emergency fund, you think more clearly, right? If you're not stressed about immediate money, you can make better decisions because you're not rushed.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's what you should do.
It's why usually when you get advice from a mentor or a coach, usually the advice is a lot better because they're not emotionally tied to your situation.
Yes.
And so if you can get yourself in a financial situation like that, you can make decisions clearer because you're maybe not as emotionally strapped to the decision at that point, because we all know how we respond when money's tight. Right?
Exactly. So if you had $500 a month, right, you take $250 a month, you put that into that emergency fund. We used to say a money market account could be a place to put that, right? Money market account typically does a little bit better than a typical savings account.
And I think it's better than in a savings account because if it's a little harder to get to, you're less likely to use it on frivolous things.
Yeah. Amen. Yep. So that's good. So you want that kind of separate, right? And then my goal was always to never have to touch that either. I wanted to continue to make enough money. I could continue to build that up, right? Yeah. And have at least 6 months and more, because the bigger that gets, the more options you have, the more dry powder, so to speak, you have. Then if there is a good opportunity that comes along, you can take advantage of it. We can talk about it in a second, because that's something you got to be careful of too, is if you do have a lot of dry powder, you might make stupid decisions because it's easy because you have the money there. So we'll talk about that in a second. Then we would take another 25% and put that into a short-term account. That might be an account that you're going to use every, say, 3 to 5 years. And what are you going to use in 3 to 5 years? Maybe a new car, maybe, stuff like refrigerator breaks.
If you don't own a house, that might be the down payment.
There you go. Yep. So that'd be your 3 to 5 year account. That might be in some, a little more conservative mutual fund type accounts, right? And then you will have another 25% into your long-term, we would say retirement accounts, 5+ years. That's going to be, like we would probably say a good place to start could be like an S&P 500 fund, right? Which you're a big believer in that for obvious reasons. You look at the S&P 500 long-term, it's just outdone almost everything, right?
It has,
And it's you don't have to think about it. You put it in there. The economy, the American economy is done well over the long term for decades and decades.
Years.
Yeah. So that would be the fundamentals of your savings, right? What would you say when it comes to debt? Is debt good, bad? How would you, when people are on their way, should they avoid debt all the way? Should they use some debt? There's a lot of different ways.
I would say there's a lot of philosophies on that, and I think it depends on what you really want, right? So first of all, there absolutely are bad debts, right? And bad debts are things that are going to depreciate in value quickly, such as cars or if you're financing credit card debt, stuff like that. So those are a lot of times student loans. Those, in my mind, are bad debts because they're usually things that people are purchasing that they just simply can't afford. And student loans I usually throw in there because we all know the person who worked their way through college. So personally, right, I didn't go to college. I think that it's right for some people. Lord knows if you're going to be a dentist or a doctor, a lawyer, we're glad you go to college, right? But for the majority of people, that probably isn't going to be the best use of their time or assets, right? And so I would say those are bad debts. And then outside of that, if I've always been the person, I've tried to stay away from debt. So could I have made more money if I would have used leverage with it? Yeah, probably. But it sure helps my quality of life because I never stress about
your
money.
Peace of mind is like awesome because you don't owe anybody anything.
Yeah, exactly. I don't ever have to worry about anything. I live life the way I want because I don't owe anybody any money next month. It doesn't matter to me.
A friend of mine used to say, I love all my cars that I have because when I turn them on, they go paid for, right?
Yes, exactly.
I sleep like a baby at night, and it's true. Like we have no debt. Life is great. Just that alone. No debt.
Like paying cash for cars, is that the wisest thing to do with money? Maybe not, but it sure helps me emotionally, right? And so for me personally, I like to pay cash for things. Even my first house that I ever bought, I paid cash for. Now, was that the wisest thing in the world? Probably not financially, right? But I still look back and I don't regret it.
Tell you what, man, I think you can argue it either way, right? But I'm the same way. If I was going to, and I told you this back in the day when you were buying your first house, if you remember, I said, Jeff, don't buy that house unless you could pay cash for it. You don't have to use your cash if you don't want to, but if you're going to buy a house, don't buy it until you have enough cash to pay for it.
Exactly.
Same thing with cars, right? Everybody out there, you shouldn't be buying a car. You don't have the cash set aside to pay it off if you needed to. Go ahead and get a loan if you want to, but don't get that loan unless that's just a rule of thumb. Yeah, you got to start somewhere, but that's a rule of thumb that I've tried to follow.
I think when you decide like what kind of house or what kind of car you're going to buy, I would suggest you buy a car that is the value of your monthly income and a house that's the value of your annual income.
Yeah, I think it's a good rule.
So people say, man, well, like a house in St. George right now, average house is $500,000. So you're telling me I should make $500,000 a year before I buy a house? Yeah, that's what I think so. Yeah, and if you don't want to do it that way, then however you're going to save up enough cash to be able to pay cash for it. And again, if you want to keep that money invested,
sure,
that's fine. Do that.
Because arguably, you could potentially take that money and do better with investments, while and take a mortgage out and get a lower interest rate and have the tax write off and blah blah blah. Right. Yeah. But again, peace of mind. I'm like you, and probably why you think some way the way you do is because you came from we started
from the same environment.
Yeah. And I was the same way. I wanted my cars paid for, my house paid for, and if I had that, my peace of mind was like, okay, I'm good. Like, could I do better if I didn't pay my house off and use that money to invest? Maybe.
Yeah.
But
then when it comes back to debt, so I always say, your house you live in is not an asset, right? Like people go, when it's paid off, you still have a rent payment, and it's called taxes and insurance, right? Like,
sure.
And they go up every year too. So your rent goes up every year to live in a paid off home. So your home is really never paid off. You're always still going to have to pay to live there, and like,
right.
If you got taxes and insurance and internet and utilities and all that, it's, even if your house is paid off, these days still a couple grand a month to live in, right? So I think that's an important thing to understand. Now, I do think that using debt to purchase assets that will pay you a cash flow on a monthly basis, like real estate, or I think real estate is the best example in that. So, like if you put down a down payment, let's say you buy $1 million property and you put 20% down, you're actually leveraging $1 million of value, right? But you only had to put $200,000 into it. So you can create a lot of wealth that way, as well as a lot of tax advantages. But in this modern day, so many people are selling it as this passive income, and I'm sorry, but it's just not. It's not passive income.
Rates are high today. You can't get enough payment to have it be a passive income at this point. They're different environments.
That too, but still, stuff breaks, stuff happens, and even if you have a property manager, someone still has to manage the property manager.
And someone's got to be renting it.
Yes, and so I'm all for it. I think it's very wise to do if you have the knowledge. But personally, I think there's a time and a place. There's a saying that says that like the average millionaire has 7 streams of income. And while that might be true, the average millionaire used 1 stream to get rich. And then they diversified once they were wealthy. You see all these people trying to get wealthy and you're like, oh, I'm just working on my 7 streams, and it's like, dude, you got to get good at one first.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think on your way to wealth, you should get really good at wealth creation through one skill that's going to pay you a lot of money. Get financially secure and stable so you're bulletproof no matter what happens. And then you can start investing into things, because learning the real estate game takes time and effort and energy. You've got to you have to put some time and effort into that, right?
And you got to be patient.
You do. And so if you can get a business or an income, and some people use real estate to do that, but a lot of people that sell real estate actually never become real estate investors, which always blows my mind, like the guy that sells real estate that doesn't own a house, it's like, dude, you're going against everything you say you believe in, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, you find a way to grow your income, and then you can use that to, if real estate is your chosen route, then do that. For me, I made a ton of money in indexed funds over the years, but I've also made money in real estate, but I think that happened because I could make decisions when the opportunity presented itself. And at that point I had enough financial IQ to know when to make a good decision.
So let's talk about that now, and then we'll move on to friends, because we'll spend all night. We can spend all night just on finances.
Serious,
for sure.
huh?
So let's talk about investing, because that's something that my personal experience. I've been again very blessed to have a lot of dry powder, so to speak, set aside, and then investment opportunities would come my way, and they all look good. They're all presented. They're man, I can't lose with this one. Oh man, I can trust this person. I can do that. And so I've made the mistake. I've made some good ones, but I've also made a lot of bad ones. And I've done both, right? And I would say that just because somebody's your friend or your stake president or whatever advises you to, or maybe they're starting something and it looks really good, doesn't necessarily make it a good investment. Right. Most of the time, most opportunities that come your way, you ought to probably say no to probably 9 out of 10 of them. Yep. And if you're going to say yes, my experience is you probably ought to be involved with it. I mean, that's kind of my rule of thumb now is I really am not interested in investing something that I'm not personally in, that I'm not personally have some sort of, I don't want to say control, but I have some influence on that investment. Yep. Because the others, look, even if they have good intentions, even if these people have good intentions and they're taking your money and it's not their money, it's not as, I don't know if sacred is the right word, but it's not as sacred to them as it is to you. Now, I also think, and I like to get your comments on this, I also think that you have to look at it as, I try to look at everything that I have as God's, right? So, and we'll get to faith at the end, but all my money, it's not my money, it's God's money. My house, it's God's house. My, everything I have. So I also have to look at it that way. So when I make an investment, I'm investing God's money into this investment, and it makes me look at it more, try to do a little more research maybe than maybe the typical person was, right? But then if it does go south, I also can look at it and go, okay, it's God's money. He obviously chose for that to go somewhere else, because I didn't just throw it into something blindly. Anyway, so those are just some of my philosophies on investing. Is if once you do have money set aside, you want to be wise in where you put that money. And I don't know. There's just this is where good old mutual funds and then good real estate deals are pretty tried and true, right? Yep. You start going on other types of things and businesses that are out there and ideas that people have, it becomes very speculative. Crypto, I mean, there's people that invest in, I put some money in crypto and I've made some and I've lost some, and it's, a little bit of both, and some I'm waiting to see what's going to happen. Yep. But that's all little pieces of my investment that I go, okay, I can put this aside, and if I lose it all, it's okay. I think this is going to do well. It's God's money. I'm going to put God's money over here, and if God wants it to do well, it's going to go well, and then I'm going to bless as many people's lives as I can if it does go well. And if it doesn't go well, then his money needed to go somewhere else. So anyway, those are my 2 cents on investing. Yeah,
I think when it comes to that, based on your comments, I think about the parable of the talents.
Yes.
And anybody that knows the parable of the talents, where this master is leaving, and so he leaves these 3 guys some money, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing majorly. And he called them talents, but really we can convert it to money in those days, right? The first one got 5, the second one got 2, and the third one got 1, I believe. And the when he comes back, the first one that got 5 doubled the investment. So he came back and says, I have 5, and he says, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Second one come back and says, hey, I doubled the investment. He says, well done, thy good and faithful servant. The third one comes back and said, here, I brought you your money back. I buried it. And he said, thy wicked and slothful servant. Now, I've always told people it wasn't because he did a bad thing. It was because he did nothing, right? He didn't do anything bad. He simply brought back exactly what he was giving, but that wasn't the plan, right? And that's very clear in that message that, hey, if we've been blessed with something, we are just stewards. And we should plant those things and be fruitful with them, whether it's our family, all these different areas of life we're going to talk about. So when you're talking about finances, I think that everything we've been blessed for should be used for good. And the best way we can do that is multiply the amount of good people that have good money by helping invest our money wisely and being good servants of it, right? And I always remember that saying, well done, thy good and faithful servant. And so when it comes to actually investing, if someone is like becoming a doctor or a lawyer or a surgeon or something like that, I truly believe, to this, knowing everything I've learned, been in the investment business for 20 years now, I really believe that the best place someone like that could put their money is into an indexed fund, because it truly is passive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if they're willing to ride it out. There's going to be ups and downs.
30, 40 years, put
Yep.
it away.
They don't have to think about it. It legitimately is autopilot. And they say, well, what if I lose all my money? Well, if you're putting an S&P, like an S&P 500 index fund, for example, the only way you would lose all of your money is for all 500 of those companies to go out of business at the same time. And if that happens, you don't need money.
Money's not worth it anyway.
Yeah. And so I think it's the wrong question, is what happens if I lose all my money? The reality is saying, would you ever bet against America, right? And looking back on those years, anybody who ever bet against the American economy has lost.
Yeah.
And so I always just think about, you think about Las Vegas. People go down to Las Vegas, you got these huge casinos, and what built those casinos were people who understood the odds. And so I just want to put the odds in my favor when it comes to investing my money and investing in good, high-quality companies that do a good job for the American consumer and really across the globe. And so I think that is a passive investment. You're not having to worry about what Elon Musk is, what kind of car he's coming out with next. It's just he's doing it because he's motivated and he's going to build a great business.
Great book on that, Unbreakable by Anthony Robbins. Unshakable by Anthony Robbins. People can read that. It's really good. And so when it comes to investing, I think I second that. I mean, that's solid, proven, long-term, your long-term investments, that's a good place to go.
And then if you've got a sizable net worth and you say, you know what, I want to start diversifying because your net worth is sizable, then I think it's wise probably to learn some real estate investing. And whether there's multiple philosophies, but I think it would be wise if you're going to do single family or multifamily or commercial, I think it would be wise to pick a lane and get really good at that thing, just like you did your career. So whether it was single family home investing, there's multiple methods, whether it's fix and flip or buy, renovate. And
you look at real estate, right? You look at St. George. St. George is blowing up.
It's crazy.
Long term, you're not going to go wrong buying real estate in St. George, right? You get the depreciation, you get all the tax benefits that way. It's hard to argue that it's not a great place to put your money.
And you talk about tax benefits. I mean, the reality is most people need tax benefits. But if you do follow these fundamentals we're going to talk about, there's going to be a day where you absolutely need tax benefits. And it's wise to know that those things are available to mitigate taxes, right?
But I'd say, index funds are great. Invest in yourself, invest in your business and in you for a long period of time. Yep. So, okay, good. We better move on because we can keep going. But, okay, friends. So on the Solid 30 Challenge, one of the things we challenged people to do was to reach out to somebody on a daily basis and have a conversation with somebody they haven't talked to in a little while. Yep. And that's something that, I probably don't do enough of on my own without doing the challenge. I do it more. Actually, since I've done the challenge, I do it a lot more. So it did help me in that regard a lot. Yeah. And I will tell you all this, that during that Solid 30 Challenge, I made one phone call towards the end of the challenge that is going to be a major impact for us in a business that we're doing right now because of somebody that I reached out to and just talked to them and asked them how their business was doing. And they said, great. And I said, hey, I'd like to do what you're doing here locally. Anyway, it's turning into something really big, right? Yeah. So not that was the reason I was doing it. I was doing it just to touch base and see how people were doing, but I had so many people say, man, it's so good to talk to you. And then I would get off the phone and I'd go, man, it was so good catching up with that person. It's been a while, and hopefully, it enriched their lives. It sure as heck enriched my life, just calling. I called some people I hadn't talked to for 2 or 3, 4 years, 5 years, and just to say hi. So that was something that I wasn't doing near enough of before the challenge. And now I do a lot more of. And again, for 30 days straight every day, big impact for me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't do it enough. I should do it more, which is why we added it to the challenge. But it's because for many years of my life, really that was part of our business. And what happened was because I was required to network for my business, it became a way of life, and I built so many incredible relationships. And I can look back on these great relationships and go, it was because I was intentionally networking or intentionally friendship farming. And a lot of time for men, it is not an easy thing to just continuously water drip or feed that relationship. It's just, guys can go 2 years without talking and talk again, and it's just like nothing.
Yep.
You know, I know women are a little bit different in that situation. So for me, I really like this part of the challenge, and I always try to do it more often. I think it's another great thing about a challenge. It challenges you to do it more. But I look back at my career, my life, the friendships that I've built, and it was always those times where I intentionally reach out to people, and sometimes it was uncomfortable, but then I've built these lifelong relationships that I'm so grateful for. And there is a lot of science based around your longevity is going to be impacted by the community of people that you're around. Oh. And so I think when you're saying, hey, I'm calling someone just to catch up, and it feels good when you hang up, for you, it absolutely feels good for you, and it absolutely feels good for them. Mm-hmm. But it does, and it does. It changes our lives. It affects us so much that we actually live longer. And so if it helps us live longer, that tells us that it's good for everybody around. God wants us to do it, and we should do it more. And then opportunities are going to pop up, whether it's financial opportunities for maybe someone was just down and out and they heard your voice, mm-hmm. and it changed everything. You never know what was happening in someone's personal life. I remember when I first started in financial services, I got this guy gave me this list of referrals, and I called him, and he kind of yelled at me as I called this referral, and I knew him, right? So I just got referred to him from a mutual friend. I called him. He kind of yelled at me, and I was listening to this audio, and it was actually Whittle talking about how he had done something similar. He had called an old coach of his. This coach, he asked his coach for an appointment. The coach basically told him no way, and he just felt like so sad, but he realized that this coach of this basketball team's star player had died that night, and he didn't know what that guy was going through. And so I remember thinking, so I called that guy back and realized that guy had a major family situation that he was going through. So here I was beating myself up about not getting an appointment for this referral and the way he treated me, and just not, if I would have just not been thinking about just the appointment, but just reaching out to someone as a friend, like I knew him.
Sure.
But I was just reaching out for an appointment. And so now looking back with some more wisdom, I go, there's situations like that where just my calling and saying, hi, how are you? I ended up getting an appointment. That's how I learned all this later, right? But I think I could have made a more positive impact at that moment if I would have been more selfless mm-hmm. in making sure that I was just reaching out to friends, just creating that bond, building a relationship. And we all know great things. You cannot have a great relationship without trust. Mm-hmm. And trust comes from just the sheer willingness to have a selfless act. You know, hey, I'm just reaching out. Yeah. So I think it's a super important thing. It's been powerful in my life, and I know it has in yours and anybody else listening, right?
Yeah, the connections we have, the relationships we have, it's not really what you know in life, it's who you know, right?
It is.
And those relationships are valuable and something that we shouldn't take for granted, yeah. and we need to build upon them. So,
and you don't build them if you're not actively watering those things.
Yep, it's true. And they die. They die if you don't water them. So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And like you say, you know, men are a little different than women in most of the time, where I've got friends I haven't talked to for months, and then we meet up and we're like, we were just together yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Even a text, you know, I know we've said call, even a text.
Yeah.
I had a mutual friend of ours just reach out to me last night through text, and it was just so good to see his name pop up on my phone, you know, just to say, hey, how are you? How's the family? And I haven't talked to him for maybe a year or something, but it was awesome. And
I had the same thing. It's probably the same guy.
It probably was. Yeah, it probably was, which is cool, right? Yeah. And so I think that in those times, like, and he probably has no idea that I was, like, I told him I was excited to see his name, but mm-hmm. I like genuinely was excited to see his name. He probably doesn't think I really was.
It is cool. Yeah, they reach out and they hey, could you help? You know, so this was a particular one. Was my son-in-law needs a little bit of help right now, and I'm like, so anyway, it was just good that they're reaching out. I feel honored that they're reaching out. That's a cool thing, and I think sometimes I feel like I'm burdening somebody if I ask for help, but that's never the case. People feel honored to help when you're. In fact, they're like, really, you're going to ask me? Yeah. Like if you call and ask me for help, I'm like, whoa, Jeff's asking me for help. I feel honored, you know, and so. We got to remember that, because sometimes I am like, I don't need to ask for help. I can handle this on my own. Why not ask for help? But that's what we're all here for. Like you say, we live longer. We have more help. That's what God wants us to do. That's why we're all here, is to help each other out.